This episode of ChatGPD was made possible by the hard work and creativity of our production team. A huge thank you to Emily Young, Chris Sang, and Alakia Chandran for their expert production, editing, and behind-the-scenes magic that brings each conversation to life. We also want to thank Sarah Topa and the IMS for their support in helping us share ideas, stories, and resources that empower our grad students at every stage of their journey.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of ChatGPD, our podcast on careers in biomedical science. I'm Pamela Plant, and I'm the Director of Graduate Professional Development here at the IMS. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Helen Miliotis, who is an assistant professor teaching stream at the University of Toronto in the Faculty of Physiology. Faculty of Medicine, Department of Physiology. Welcome, Helen. How are you today?
Hi, Pam. Thank you for having me.
I'm thrilled that you're here. So, Helen, we always start with our guests just talking about their journey to where they are today, what you do, what your job looks like, but really start by your journey.
Sure. Thank you. Well, I was a graduate student in the IMS doing graduate work at the Lunenfeld, graduating in 2012. Being involved in IMSA and other student societies as well. Learned a lot, had a wonderful time. And then once the PhD was wrapping up, I took some time to reflect and see what I wanted to do in terms of my next steps. I knew at that point that I wanted to start a family as well. So as I graduated, I took some time away from the bench. I had my first child and then started thinking about what else did I like doing and so on. I was always drawn to teaching. And so I found an opportunity to be a sessional instructor. I embraced that. And then as time went on, I picked up more teaching opportunities, wanted to do a little bit more formal training in it as well. And at that point, I decided not to do a formal postdoc, but instead I went to the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education, OISE, here at U of T. And I did the Leadership in Higher Education certificate program. And that just really opened my eyes to what else goes on behind the scenes. Because I found that as a graduate student, and I'm sure this is common for many, we're very focused on our work and maybe we understand our department well, maybe even the faculty. But how does that still fit into U of T as a whole or academia as a whole? And so behind the scenes things like quality of education, access, funding. Like, why do we pay the tuition that we do? How are we governed? What does it mean to be essentially in a publicly funded education system here in Ontario versus the States? So I learned a lot, and it inspired me to continue pursuing education. At that point, I just continued talking to people, picking up different opportunities as they came, and as I networked and learned about things that were going on at U of T again or other institutions. I transitioned from Trent University, where I had my first teaching job, back to U of T. I met people involved in the graduate professional development space, so Dr. Nana Lee, and some of my training at OISE was around student development theory, and so that really helped me in that role. And then going back to basics in terms of my actual scientific training, I taught a biochemistry class, I taught physiology class as well, and then slowly transitioned into a more permanent role where I am today.
So before I get to the permanent role and what that looks like every day, I want to talk about that juncture. You said you were a graduate student in IMS, and maybe you could just talk about where you were, what your project was like, just so that can resonate with a lot of our listeners who are grad students. And at what point in that graduate work did you decide, I don't want to pursue an academic route?
So it was never a decision that I made overnight. And I would say actually throughout my graduate degree, I was very open to a career in science as well, in academia, staying in academia. We recognize that in graduate school, there are always challenges, but this was something that I looked at favorably overall. It wasn't like I graduated knowing for sure that I didn't want to do a postdoc. I just knew that I wanted to take some time to think about it. Again, have my first child and then revisit it. And as a graduate student, you asked for a few more details. I was at the Lunenfeld here at Mount Sinai Hospital. I was looking at T-cell signaling pathways and how genetic polymorphism was potentially linked to increased susceptibility to autoimmune diseases, and then looking at some of that pathophysiology as well, and maybe rheumatoid arthritis, maybe type 1 diabetes. And so that led more into the physiology that I teach these days. And so I was still very open in graduate school to stay in academia. It wasn't like it was a moment or a juncture. I just knew that I didn't want to do it immediately. It was that I wanted, my life to also have a chance for other life, developing other life events that were important to me at the time. And so then the more I was away from it, the more I realized that, while I love science and I want to be involved in it, how can I do that? Is it a postdoc? I did think about it at times, or is it something else that I could do?
So let's fast forward, and can you talk about what you do today in the Department of Physiology? What does your role look like? What does your typical week look like? I know you manage different programs. So could you talk a lot about what you do on a daily basis, weekly basis?
Sure. So nowadays in the Department of Physiology in the teaching stream, I'm involved partially in undergraduate teaching. So there are large undergraduate classes of over 1,000 people teaching endocrine physiology there, as well as being involved in some third and at times fourth year courses with our undergraduates. And then for the research stream students, our Masters of Science and the PhD students, I run the graduate professional development course for those students, really helping them, identify what they may want to do in terms of their next steps and connecting them to potential different professionals from different fields. And then the majority of my role right now is I'm the director of a professional master's program, the Master of Health Science and Medical Physiology. And so I both direct the program and teach in the program.
So what is that program like? How is a professional master's different than a research-based master's, for those that don't know?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, while we have our research stream students doing primary bench research, and really coming up with new discoveries, the Department of Physiology and others in the Faculty of Medicine realized that there was a little bit of a gap as well, whereby a lot of this new knowledge was being discovered, but a lot of graduate students were lacking the skills to maybe, make the next jump of how to apply these to the real world. So we had a number of Masters of Science students that, while they wanted to study physiology, learn new skills, they weren't really interested in doing the primary research, but there were not many other alternatives to pursue physiology graduate studies other than the primary research. So some folks before me realized this gap and proposed a program whereby we still train students in some advanced physiology courses, but we also give them some additional skills like commercialization specific to the biomedical sciences, specific to physiology, or data analytics, again, specific to health-related data sets or patient records, wearable devices, and so on, whereby you still need that foundational background in physiology to know the meaning behind the data, but they needed some more coding and analytic skills to actually be able to translate that essentially to their next steps. So over a number of years, this program was proposed and developed to kind of bridge that gap between new knowledge being generated at the bench in physiology specifically and biomedical sciences, you could argue, and then how they can then quickly jump into diverse careers. So within a 1 year, they are now doing careers in healthcare consulting, clinical trial management, data analytics, and more, again, hospital and health-related settings, involved in startups and biotech and so forth.
Thanks for that description. I think that was a great one. And it sounds like you have a very multifaceted job. So not only are you teaching, you have this directorial aspect to your job as well. So I think, when I ask you my next questions, it's going to be hard to answer because you do so many things in the context of your job. But really, I have so many students that say, I want a teaching stream faculty job. And that looks very different. You and I both are teaching stream and our jobs look different. So I want you to just describe maybe the skills that you utilize in your job currently, obviously as the director of the program and as a teaching or teacher per se. What are some of the skills that you've leveraged from your core competencies in grad school that got you to where you are? And maybe speak to some of the skills and experience that our students can gain now while they're in grad school to help them kind of develop the skills needed for success in these roles.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we all know that careers are not static. We're constantly needing to learn and adapt. And I think that's one of the main things, of course, from my graduate work. You know, in our training, you're learning new techniques, you're learning new knowledge all the way throughout your degree, and you need to adapt quickly based on your findings and so forth. So learning how to learn quickly and adapting quickly, I think, is sometimes underestimated by students. They're doing it, but it can really come in very handy in the long term, of course. Organizational skills are key, really, to try and keep multiple balls or multiple projects up in the air at the same time, project management, timelines, really understanding also different points of view, really coming to conversations and thinking about, what it is that everyone wants to get out of a certain project or a certain initiative that we're doing and so forth, having that ability to, in graduate school, thinking about, what your objectives are, thinking about your supervisor's objectives, the field as a whole, trying to meld all of those together. In my role today, really thinking about the student's point of view, but also, what I need to do in terms of the departmental perspective and the university-wide, and then also preparing students for their next steps. What does the sector need when we have our practicum placement partners? How do I listen to them and their needs as well? So really having the ability to hear the different voices and trying to make sure that outcomes are such that everybody around the table is getting to what they want out of it. So that's one thing as well that I think I underappreciated at the time. Networking, of course, learning to talk to people, building bridges to different sectors and areas and other teachers and collaborators as well is also key. Persuasive communication actually is another one. So in science, whether we realize it or not, we are always persuading others, whether it be through our papers, whether it be through our grants writing. Our thesis itself is a thesis defense, a form of persuasive communication. And so that definitely has played a big role for me, whether it be for proposing new courses, for proposing this whole new program, taking it through governance at all the different levels, both from the Faculty of Medicine to the university, and then further up to the government level that it needed for approval. So those are some of the, transferable skills that I use from my graduate degree to my day-to-day.
So I know you and I talked about this before, and there was some hesitancy about speaking on a career as a teaching stream faculty because they are unique. I'm not going to say rare because they do exist, but they're very unique positions. And maybe it's not as linear as a posting goes up. I have seen them. I have seen postings for teaching stream faculty. They are very, very infrequent, but oftentimes they're developed and you kind of get your foot in the door as a sessional and then it just kind of grows. So again, your own journey was very similar to that. That was, it seemed like it was gradually increasing into a fulsome faculty position. So I guess what I'm asking is, again, what can students do in graduate school now, aside from the development of their transferable skills, to really build hard skills that will make them more competitive for these kind of positions?
Yeah, I mean, the most obvious would be to try and get
Teaching.
teaching TA positions. So depending on your graduate unit, the graduate department, there may be teaching opportunities available or not. I know in the IMS at times as a graduate student, because there wasn't the undergraduate equivalent, there wasn't a feeder department into IMS, I did have a little bit of a hard time finding a teaching assistantship, but they're out there. And so I was able to get a position with cell and systems biology, teaching essentially a molecular biology course. And so that gave me a lot of great experience to face students at a tutorial level. So there's different kinds of TA-ships as well. And I think students should try and gain experience in different ones if they're really serious about a teaching stream position, because there are the positions where they're simply grading positions. Okay, that gives you some insights into assessment, for example, but running a tutorial is different. Running a lab is also very different. And so those are great skills that those people that can be developed. I think it's also important to understand a little bit of the background of teaching, at least the basic principles. So, learning objectives with teaching and assessments, kind of that continuing. And so if you're TAing, don't just focus simply on the hours and the training at hand. While I'm not saying to spend a considerate amount of time outside of that, but trying to get a little bit of insight, maybe by talking to the course coordinator, talking to others as to, how this fits into the whole course. How does this fit into the whole program of study, the major in physiology, for example. And then there are a number of resources in the teaching support offices. So for example, the Center for Teaching Support and Innovation here at U of T, in different institutions have different equivalents that have a number of workshops. All of them are free, but some of them can be on virtual, on Zoom, some of them can be in person, but really trying to take a few to understand maybe some of the fundamentals of maybe the universal design of learning or accessibility for students. How do you design a course? Just to understand a little bit about what it is that you're TAing. So I think those are really important. Obviously, there are also educational conferences that one can take. Some of them are more accessible than others. So there is an organization called OCUBE. So as the name OCUBE.org, I believe. And it's the Open Consortium for Undergraduate Biology Educators. So they have a virtual one-day conference in December. They have a local conference as well in May. So there are a number of events like that. McMaster has a one-day conference. Western has a conference a few days. Obviously, there are much bigger conferences as well that are more international, much more expensive. But there are some local Ontario excellent teaching conferences as well that students can potentially try and log into, a few hours of a session as an easy entryway to kind of see how educators are talking about education as well. Because the other aspect as a teaching stream faculty, beyond the teaching and administration and the coordination, is the pedagogical research as well. We are faculty members. We are expected to really contribute to the field, do research, and really try and advance it with best practices. So what we call SOTL, the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning. And it can be a jump because, we're trained, a lot of us, in the biomedical sciences, and suddenly now this is a whole new area of work that we can begin to learn and grow into. But there are opportunities that are maybe small entry points, key entry points to see if one is interested in learning more.
Yeah, and I think, just speaking of SOTL, because you and I are in the same boat there, there are phenomenal projects that we could be doing, and we're always eager to find students that would volunteer to do that kind of research with us because our bandwidth is limited. So that's another entree for students in a graduate department to approach a teaching stream faculty and even propose a research question within the context of teaching. Just wanted to also mention the TATP, which is the TA training program through the CTSI for students at University of Toronto. And again, there are equivalents at other universities where you can get a more formalized training through for TA-ship. But
And I would
guess,
also, sorry to
yeah,
interrupt, Pam,
yeah.
if one was to be even more invested in it, there aren't that many programs in Canada, but in the States, there are programs whereby you can combine a postdoc with more formal teaching stream
Training.
faculty
Okay.
training.
Ah,
So that's
interesting.
also something that students can potentially look into. Not as many in Canada, but certainly if one really is serious about melding the two, there are postdocs that
That's
can be
phenomenal.
done.
Actually, that brings up a really good point as well, Helen, that are there bits of advice beyond those programs that you mentioned? I know one thing that comes to mind is I always tell students to reach out to either their supervisors or colleagues of their supervisors who teach undergraduate and graduate courses and say, could I take a lecture? Could I, they're always eager to offload their teaching responsibilities. So, can I help structure a lecture? Can I do slides, or can I deliver a lecture? Just try to seek opportunities like that when you can't really have a formal TA-ship or a teaching position. You can do adjacent or pseudo prototyping for teaching, like the teaching courses, or just mentorship programs in departments. You're teaching in the context of your lab as well. There are junior students in the lab. So how do you approach their learning? Maybe do it in a more structured way. Have group learning. There are a few undergrads or grads, new grads in the department. You can gather them together, do a training in whatever technique that you have mastered as a graduate student, and then those all count as teaching experience because you are just imparting knowledge, and you might not be assessing their learning, but you're certainly mentoring. And I think mentorship is a big part of learning as well.
Yeah, for sure. I think another big part of our role is administration. So, and sometimes students don't realize that. They might see us a few hours a week in the classroom teaching, but at the same time, there's so much administration that goes on in the back as well in terms of committees, or I sit on the admissions committees and so forth, award committees and so on. So the other experiences that students can volunteer for are to sit on these committees. Faculty job search, the search committees usually have a student that sits on the committee. Awards committees, even for faculty awards, have students that sit on those committees. So the more governing council has opportunities for students. So it's also great to see that aspect of a faculty position, whether it be research stream or the teaching stream, that graduate students can get into.
Yeah, basically leadership opportunities within their graduate units. That always looks great on a resume when you have engaged in, like you say, on these search committees or entrance committees or anything that shows, kind of a community building within the faculty. I think it is a great experience that would, make them pop on their resume. I want to bring up the concept of mentorship because you would do a lot of mentoring in your role, especially in the context of professional development, because you do teach a course. Can you speak to that a bit, and what you do kind of on a weekly basis for a lot of your graduate students that you're teaching?
Sure. I mean, some of it is formalized and a lot of it is just ad hoc. With mentorship, I had a lot of great mentors throughout my graduate degree and beyond. And in a more formalized way, the training that I got, again, I'll bring up that program at OISE, the Leadership in Higher Education. There was, there was formal training in student development and sort of the theoretical frameworks of that and different examples of mentoring for students. And again, kind of getting to some of the frameworks around it. So that has really helped me in my current role. And the one thing that we have to be careful with is, knowing our limits as well, because I can mentor in terms of professional development, next steps, and wayfinding, and some counseling. But at some point, I have to draw the line and say, now this is beyond my scope. And so I can refer you, for example, when there are cases where I think I need health and wellness, for example, to come in, or accessibility and so forth. So I think being a mentor is also a way for being that guide for the next referral, for the next step, for the next connection. So it's often referring people to the right resources, and also referring them to a lot of other people that they should speak to professionally as well. If you want to become this career, maybe you should speak to this person, maybe you should try this experience, and so forth.
Yeah, you're really like a point person.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you are the one that's connected. You know what the resources are. You just help steer them in the right direction.
That's
just
right.
Tweak the rudder. Just curious if you could give me some insight into what are the challenges that students that are wanting these kind of positions, these teaching stream faculty positions, what are the challenges that you face, and how do you address these challenges? But what would you advise them to be aware of should they be contemplating these roles?
I mean, these roles are not very common. We've talked about this. They are, and they can be quite precarious as well in terms of job security. So for me, when I graduated, as I said, there were life events. I had one child, I had a second child. And so I was okay with the part-time nature of this kind of work, because, you're hired as a sessional instructor for basically either half a course or a whole course. And you may be lucky and get a couple of courses a semester, but more often than not, you don't. So in terms of finances, in terms of sustaining yourself, your family, people need to be aware that, because very often you begin with just sessional work, you have to be able to support yourself in some other capacity. So whether it be doing a postdoc along the side or something else. For me at the time, it was okay because I wanted to work in a part-time role for just the few early years. And then I just kept building from that. We also have to be very adaptable, because just because we have a favorite subject area doesn't mean that we get to teach in that subject area. So you have to be aware of generally your wheelhouse in terms of teaching, and realizing that there are in fact a number of, especially introductory undergraduate courses that you can teach, and being very adaptable to, a posting might come up and say, well, this course begins in 2 weeks. So really being able to jump in and take it from there. And I remember for myself, I applied early on within a 2-hour radius of where I lived to be able to maximize my opportunities, because sessional instructors themselves, those contracts are very far and few in between. Eventually, when one does establish their experiences, there may be opportunities to get more long-term roles that may be a 1-year contract, where under that 1 year, you might be tasked to teach a certain number of courses. Some contracts might be 3 years. And so that's kind of how I eventually built to where I am today, whereby it was a lot of sessional one-off courses, moving from institution to institution, moving from department to department, depending on where the postings were, then applying to 1-year postings, then applying to 3-year postings, and eventually applying to the full-time continuing postings. So it's not a linear path. People need to realize that they need to be adaptable, resilient as well with the times. Don't put all your eggs in one basket, because it can be precarious.
That's great advice. And I think that's a very good and accurate glimpse on a lot of faculty, but teaching stream faculty positions, that it is something that builds very gradually. And I know a lot of students just are so eager, they want to just apply to a teaching stream faculty position and start their careers. They need that resilience and that patience, because that is, I think, probably more the rule than the exception in terms of these faculty positions. Did you ever have an experience teaching where you were really scared to say yes to an opportunity? Like you're teaching an undergrad class of 1,500 and you just said, there's no way I want to do this, but I need to take this. Yeah, if you have ever had scary, propositions like that where you just really didn't want to do it, but you took it anyway, and what did you learn in that process when you did something like that?
Yeah, I could think of a couple of those. Certainly, one of my first positions up in Peterborough was teaching anatomy to undergraduates, biology, forensic science, and nursing students, starting at 9 a.m. in Peterborough. And so I
While
live
living in
Toronto.
Toronto.
Yes. So I thought, do I take
Yikes.
it? Do I not? But, I took it because you have to also hustle. The opportunities are rare and far and few in between. So you have to want it and you got to go get it. That's, I think, for any career. And so, yes, there were a few snow car pileups along the way on the highway, and some moments where I thought I'm spending more money, frankly, making this commute back and forth than I'm making in the 2 hours that I'm teaching here. But at the same time, it builds my experience, my adaptability. I can show that I can teach a variety of things, the experience, and really building my CV. So that was, one example. The other example was actually for this professional master's program that I'm the director for, because while I had done a lot of teaching, when it came time to, putting, when colleagues said, we're going to need a director for this, we're thinking of putting a posting up, would you consider applying? And I thought, well, what do I know about being a director of a graduate program? And at that point, the position would be taking the program through governance. So making all the pitches, the Faculty of Medicine, being governing council, and then eventually working with the university to submit the paperwork to the Ontario government, to the ministry for funding. But, again, I went with it because opportunities are far and few between. And thinking back to my PhD and the graduate training, there were moments where you just had to pivot and learn and go with it. And so I thought, let's try it. I know how to learn quickly. I know how to be adaptable, and there's also nothing wrong with asking for help along the way as well. To say, hey, I don't know how to fill out this form or this
I
proposal.
don't know what a governing council is.
But when seeing other people around you trust you, and essentially when you're successful in that in terms of securing that position, when you go through the search and you're the one that's chosen, thinking to yourself, well, they saw something that I have, so I have to believe in it too, and go with it. And again, as scientists, we're constantly creating, we're paving our way forward. And so it's the same in a lot of these other opportunities. If something doesn't exist, create it. If something isn't easy, just try it. There are going to be obstacles, but you're going to be able to plow through it eventually.
And here's the power of a graduate degree in biomedical science. You're a professional problem solver.
Yeah.
You will figure it out. You will find a way. Use those research skills. Be inquisitive, be curious, connect, find that knowledge that you need to make those decisions. It's about believing in yourself. And I think that's brought up so many times in this podcast, is really people relying on this notion that, you know what, I'll figure it out. I usually do. So Helen, I would love to just know, what do you like best about your position?
I like a lot of things.
Good.
About the position.
Let's hear all of them.
I mean, number one is the opportunity to interact with amazing students every day, whether it be the undergraduates, because even though the classes are large, there are always some that, will filter through and come to your office and talk to you or follow you in con hall outside in the hall after you're done. So really helping them find their way and inspiring them and kind of planting the seed for more knowledge and a thirst to learn more. At the graduate student level, really getting to know the students much more, really being part of their journey and seeing over time the amazing things that they do in their careers. And then the other thing that we have the ability to do that comes with the position is the opportunity to create change, to develop new programming, to develop new courses, to develop new initiatives. Having that ability to, when you see a gap or when you see something that can be done, rallying the people around you to say, hey, let's do it. And yes, it's not always a quick process. We all know that academia can work at times at a very slow pace. There's a lot of layers, a lot of layers, of governance, bureaucracy, and so forth, but that's okay. It can get done with patience.
Okay, so the other side of that is what don't you like about your job? What could you do without? But obviously parts are necessary. So what are the parts that you dislike or like less? Let's put it that way.
Like less. Assessment is always tricky. Finding the right, especially at the undergraduate level, I would say, not so much at the graduate level, but at the undergraduate level, finding that right balance of rigor, but at the same time ensuring that you're assessing fairly, and with having so many, like our student population, right? They all come, every person has their own story, their own learning needs, their own journeys. So really finding fair assessments is quite a tricky one, especially in some of the large classes. I think that's one of the parts of my job because you also realize the impact that those assessments have potentially on that student's trajectory as well. So you want to, first of all, ensure that your learning objectives are clear, that you teach well to them, but then how do you really assess them well, but also fairly for all students, and ensuring that people have as much opportunity for success as possible.
So do you have support for creating assessments? Is there somebody in CTSI that you can bounce ideas off of, or you're not doing this in isolation?
No, never in isolation. Certainly, teaching stream faculty as well. We have our own little community of practice as well as within physiology, within the biomedical sciences as well here at the Temerity Faculty of Medicine. Again, the whole research field around it, the scholarship of teaching and learning that I alluded to behind it. There are a lot of researchers that are doing research in this area as well. So, there is a lot of talk and a lot of support, but then you have to find it unique to your student population as well, based on these best practices.
Mm-hmm. So are there any other challenges that you face in your job that?
Every job has its challenges.
Okay.
Assessment, like I said, is one thing. Certainly, some of the volume of work and some of the tough decisions that have to get done around admissions time for our graduate programs. That's something that we don't take lightly. When hundreds of applications come in for our graduate programs, that's something to really pay close attention to. It's both very time consuming, but also, again, trying to look carefully and understanding also the gravity potentially and the impact of those decisions of that committee to potentially that student trajectory. That's something that we also don't take lightly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I don't mean to put you on the spot. I just want, I want students that are listening to this to get a very fulsome understanding of what the role entails. It's not all, I think they see the good parts because they have good interactions with their teaching faculty. And they say, I want to be like that. It's about connection and relationships. And yes, absolutely it is. It's largely a connection that they have with the students, but there is a lot behind the scenes. It's like the iceberg model of
Exactly.
the of the job, where the relationship building is the part that you see, and then underneath the water is 90% committees and admin and a lot of multitasking and details that just go unseen. And I just wanted to be realistic in painting a picture for the students about that aspect of the job.
Absolutely.
So I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but I'm really, I think you've given a very fulsome view of the different aspects. Are there people in teaching stream faculty positions that are solely undergraduate teachers? And do you know anyone in those positions? What do those positions look like? Is there less administration, or is it an equal amount? What do the undergraduate positions look like?
Yes, so there are many people that are only at the undergraduate level teaching stream faculty. From speaking to some of my colleagues and seeing some of the work that they've done, and I've been in a few different departments as well to see, they are often dealing with being the coordinators of the very large undergraduate courses. So while I teach in our undergraduate physiology of 1,400 students, I'm one of the instructors. I'm not the coordinator of that course. So usually our teaching stream faculty members will be the coordinators of that course. And again, behind the scenes for a class that size, we have many, obviously, enrollments and all of that, but the teams of teaching assistants that they have to also choose and hire and train. That's a big part of their job, obviously setting all the assessments and even just organizing, for example, exams for 1,400 people, just the paper itself that needs to be collected and redistributed to the TAs. And again, some of this behind the scenes stuff that goes on that is just, often not really appreciated. So they really take the bulk of some of those large courses. They are also undergraduate coordinators, which means that they really do the admin side of, really at the undergraduate level, does an undergrad student in physiology, have they met all the fulfillments for being a physiology major, a physiology specialist? So really looking at all of that for every single students that they have to sign off on. Of course, we have administrative staff to support that as well, but at the end of the day, it's the undergraduate coordinator or the vice chair education in our departments, often again a teaching stream faculty member that is responsible for that. Obviously, new courses at the undergraduate level, going through the governance in that respect, as well as, I forgot there was one more thing. Anyhow, a lot of that administration for the undergraduate level is key. And
yeah, I think it just speaks to the fact that, again, just wanted to impart this notion that teaching stream faculty positions aren't just about teaching.
For sure. And I did remember curriculum mapping.
Yes. Okay.
And so
to describe that.
Curriculum mapping is quite a task where you have to essentially, and it varies a little bit depending on the sector, the department, and the area of study. But essentially, I'm going to use physiology again as an example, is when you're looking at the courses required, for example, a physiology major or a physiology specialist, looking at every single course, where they map to the curriculum in terms of second year, third year, fourth year, and then looking at the learning objectives of every single course. Are they taught? Are they assessed? And then as the name mapping shows, to kind of map it all out across the years of study of a student, of a physiology major, just to see, are there gaps? Are we saying that we're teaching something but we're not assessing it? Are students getting any of this skill? Maybe we think they are, but actually our very fine, detailed curriculum map shows that it's not. So how do we fill those gaps? Or maybe actually we're teaching this topic, second year, third year, and fourth year. Is there a way to not teach it all 3 years? Or are we making sure that the level of difficulty is increasing. So a lot of the granularity around the courses in the curriculum as well.
Yeah, and I think that brings up a really interesting point that what is a degree in physiology or biochemistry or molecular genetics? What does it mean? What are those learning objectives? How are they achieved? And creating the curriculum to achieve those and the assessments to properly, get an understanding for the student of whether they are qualified to have that degree.
Yes.
That goes into a whole pedagogical discussion that we don't have time for because sadly we are out of time. But before we leave, one thing we do with our guests is just offer them 1 minute to pitch their positions, their jobs to our potential students. And I would like to offer that to you. So in 1 minute, why should students consider a teaching stream faculty position?
In 1 minute. Well, so I will speak for from the perspective of the biomedical sciences. So if you love science, you want to be engaged in science in some respect and really being part of the idea of imparting that new knowledge and the existing knowledge to students, whether it be at the undergraduate or the graduate level. I think it's a great opportunity to still be involved in the field, but really teaching and inspiring the next leaders, whether it be at the undergrad or graduate level, and also having the opportunity to impart some change in higher education. It might be slow change, but being a faculty member, whether it be in the research stream or the teaching stream, really gives you that ability to slowly impart change and evolve the field with the times as well.
Thank you, Helen. You're an amazing spokesperson for teaching stream faculty positions. So I thank you for taking the time and sharing your knowledge and your journey with us.
Thank you so much for having me.